You know, a lot of people don't know this, but the Duke controller was originally designed to be used by Thanos. It's obviously the appropriate size and shape, and you have a convenient storage location for your 6 Infinity Stones. About 16 years ago, I was invited over to a friend's house to play this new game called Halo. When we arrived, I was handed what I could only describe as a large black plastic dinner plate with a cord attached to it. I didn't know how to hold this device, and I didn't know how to play the game, but I was instantly captivated by the entire experience. I've owned every Xbox generation and every Halo game since then. Duke is one of the most fascinating product launches I've ever followed. It would appear that the love-hate relationship that I experienced with this controller all those years ago wasn't unique. So then why bring back a product that was so divisive? To understand what gives the Duke its appeal, it's important to establish some context. I know it's hard to imagine now, but at one point in time, the Sega Dreamcast was the most revolutionary console on the market. The optical drive, memory card units, and the LAN port for internet connectivity were all extremely forward-thinking for a console released in 1998. The influence of the Dreamcast on the development of the original Xbox is evidenced by the early design sketches of what would eventually become the Duke. This was Microsoft's first venture into the realm of console development, and as such they had to pull people and resources from all walks of life to collaborate on its design. The original controller sketches were used by a third-party developer to create the circuit board. Unfortunately, the PCB was comically oversized, and the shell, quite literally, had to be designed inside out. They were aware of its excessive size and did everything within their power to make it as comfortable as possible. Gamers with especially large hands actually really admired it. I, unfortunately, was not one of those people. While the American user base was more or less split on the controller ergonomics, the Japanese market universally hated it. As a result of this feedback, the Xbox eventually launched in Japan, but was bundled with a smaller controller S. Demand for the slimmer version of the controller surged worldwide, and eventually the big boy was phased out entirely, but not before leaving a permanent mark on controllers that we know and love today. There's a very distinct familial resemblance between all Xbox controllers, and they trace their roots back to the original Duke. Over a decade later, Hyperkin's Chris Galizia approached Microsoft with the idea of resurrecting the giant device. While originally pitched as a legacy controller for use with the original Xbox, development eventually shifted to the Xbox One. At this time, in early 2017, Seamus Blackley was brought onto the project. Now, Seamus was one of the original developers of the Xbox, so he was very familiar with the Duke. But not only that, he had a lot of influence as the father of Xbox, and because of him, a lot of the more ambitious features they wanted in the Duke were able to come to reality. After several delays, we finally have the realization of the efforts of Hyperkin, Microsoft, Seamus, Chris, and several others. It really came down to a handful of really passionate individuals to make this thing happen. And because of this, they wanted this new controller to be as true to the original as possible. The size of the controller is the exact same. The dimensions and proportions are exactly 1-to-1. With my eyes shut, the difference in the hand is completely indiscernible. Even the screw holes located on the bottom of the controller are in the same exact positions. With the cables removed, the new Duke is a bit chunkier at 339 grams compared to the leaner 305 gram weight of the old model. The color and shine is very similar between the two, but the texture of the original is a bit more coarse. The face button jewels are also much more transparent on the new version. Now, despite all these efforts to remain as faithful to the original as they possibly could, there were some needed changes to be made. The Microsoft logo has been scrubbed from the front because this is not a Microsoft device. Bumpers have now also been added to the most ergonomically unsettling location possible. Now, obviously the controller wasn't originally designed to accommodate bumpers, so they really put it the only place they could. not to mention the inclusion of the bumpers was required by Microsoft to get their seal of approval. The bumpers mirror the actions of the black and white buttons, so you can use those if you prefer a more legacy experience. The start and select text has been removed and replaced with the familiar Xbox One iconography. And the triggers now also have a very faint RT and LT. I don't know this for sure, but I assume this is another prerequisite from Microsoft, considering all of their controllers also have the triggers marked. And the expansion card slots have been removed. There's really no need for them now, and they would just serve to collect dust. They also added a couple of extra features, like a 3.5mm jack on the bottom of the controller. Obviously, they had to include this because you used previously the expansion slots to plug in a headset. It also has a removable 9-foot mini USB cable. Now, USB-C would have been appreciated, but it does make more sense to have the cables usable across all Xbox One controllers. And despite the fact that you can remove the wire, the controller will not work wirelessly. It needs to be plugged into a PC or Xbox One in order to be used. This is really just because Microsoft uses their own proprietary wireless technology for the Xbox One, and they do not give that out to third-party devices. The colossal center jewel is now used as the Xbox button, and instead of just pressing on a plastic logo, it's actually an OLED screen that displays the original Xbox boot sequence. That is so cool! And that was Blackley's idea. He actually wanted that incorporated onto the original controller, but of course, I imagine for cost reasons that never happened. So it's really neat to see it here. On a side note, the original boot sequence was actually rendered by the Xbox itself in real time, and it wasn't a video. And this actually made it a little bit difficult to acquire when they were developing the controller because Microsoft didn't just have a video of that laying around. But what is it actually like to use? The buttons on the new one are very tactile and much more pleasant. The OG Duke's Face buttons are spongy, but it really just could be a result of old age. The thumbsticks feel absolutely identical. The tension feels just right, the texture is grippy, and the clicking of the thumbsticks requires the same amount of pressure to actuate and returns the same satisfying click. It also has the same squishy D-pad. Now, this could have been in place for them to improve it, but this wasn't about improving the controller, it was about bringing it back. So in that regard, I'm glad they kept it the way it is, even though I hated this D-pad when I used it. The triggers on the new Duke are also a lot looser than those found on the old one. You'd think that time and years of use would make the triggers on the old model fade, but despite its age, they are still much stiffer than the new Duke. In my opinion, they were more satisfying on the old design. Now, this is usually the point in the video where I would summarize my findings of a product and tell you whether or not I recommend purchasing it. But the new Duke is a bit of a peculiar case. If you never used the original controller, you'd likely have no motivation to buy this one, and it's not like you would gain any real strategic advantage over using this compared to the standard Xbox One controller. Its chunky size, distance between buttons, and intolerable placement of the bumpers would just be more of a challenge than anything else. So let's answer my original question. Why bring it back at all? People hated it. Some people loved it. But the important thing is that people remember it. As I shared with you at the beginning of this video, I have very specific memories of this controller. And that's why I got one. Well, if you guys appreciated this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And honestly, a thumbs up for all of the hard work of everyone that worked on this controller. And it's incredible the amount of work that goes into doing something like this. So definitely a big special thanks to them. Again, I hated this thing when I had it originally. I couldn't wait to stop using it and use something a little more practical. But that doesn't make me any less excited to have one now. Well, if you want to know where to purchase it, then go ahead and follow links in the video description. You can also check out other video reviews that we've done here, other controllers and peripherals and PC builds. And if you want to subscribe, you'll be notified when future content is available on my channel. And if you don't want to miss any alerts, then make sure you hit that alert icon to know when that content is ready. Well, thanks again for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next video. They say Thor's hammer is made out of the heart of a dying star. Just has a Duke inside.